this down. I'm going to want to lighten one up too. So, why gender equality efforts have failed? Well, for one, rationale is a more powerful thought level than emotion. Well, I'll let you chew on that for a little bit while I chew on this. All right. Well, like I said, gender equality efforts have failed. First off, because rationale is more powerful than emotion. Now, emotional thinking is being pushed so hard in our society, but at the end of the day, saying don't solve it, just listen to one too many times leads to problems not being solved. One too many problems not being solved. Okay? I don't give a fuck if you don't like me saying that. That's just the truth. And I don't like what I just did. So, I'm going to solve it. Like this. Okay. Right. No. Now, check this out. So, you know, black men got the right to vote in 1865 initially. There have been efforts to push back against the black man's right to vote. And, but we did get the right to vote before women of any color. They got the right to vote in 1920. So that's 55 years later. The U.S. has had a black POTUS, but has never had a female POTUS yet. And I believe that both of those truths exist because of the fact that even racist, even intolerant people realize that a black man is still a man and still has the ability to be rational. Whether or not he uses it is another thing. But they'd rather deal with a rational black man than an emotional woman of any color, especially in the POTUShood, in the U.S. presidency. And as much as that may hurt you, that's just the way it is. But that just points to the need for you to value rationale more than you do emotion. Let me see. And well enough there. So, now let me check something real fast. Okay. Well, now I'm getting to the good stuff, at least the stuff that I think is good. What I believe about how the mind works. And I should say that there are those who would disagree with me, but I'm a firm believer that the mind and the soul are actually one and the same thing. Somebody out there outside of my door being kind of loud with someone else. And so the mind and the soul are the same thing. It's the part of you that leaves your body when you die and goes to the hereafter. Mind, I believe, sits in the white matter of your brain, and your bodily functions, voluntary and involuntary, are controlled primarily by the gray matter in your brain. Of course, that begs the question: is there such a thing as black matter? Well, does it exist in the hereafter? Well, long story short, I do believe there is black matter, black brain matter. And interestingly enough, clouds, the side we see anyway, because the top side's always white, except at night, because the top is always facing the sun, during daylight hours. And so the underside of a cloud, when it's white, you may think about rain, but it's not going to happen. When the clouds are gray, they can do something. When the clouds are black, it's going to be something fierce. Okay? And I believe that there are parallels between the storm clouds and the brain, and that God has actually put lessons in nature that teach us about what's inside of us. I mean, think about it. If you were to take out the brain, which is also called the central nervous system, pull out a brain and the nerves, and leaving everything else in the body, which I don't think is possible, but if you could, then that gray brain would look like a little storm cloud. And if those nerves had any electrical charges going through them still, they'd look like little lightning bolts, And so God has taken certain things about how our bodies work and incorporated that into nature, and there are some parallels. And there's at least one more parallel between storm clouds and the human makeup that I'll bring up later. But anyway, so here's some stuff that I have to say about how the mind works, and there are different thought levels. So I'm not even going to address the first 6 parts of the mind. So let me say this. I believe that even though the mind consists of matter that can't be put under a microscope, the mind/soul leaves the body and goes straight into the hereafter, and you don't get to put it under a microscope. The only way to learn about it is to actually get to know the person before they die. And so there's that. But I believe that the mind actually has different spheres of thought, and the larger spheres are more active but less intelligent, less powerful. And then as you work your way in, uh, the next zone of thought going into the mind, next sphere going in, like I said, a weeble wobbles, if that works for you. That next sphere going in is more intelligent, more powerful, but and less active, less rabid, uh, and it works kind of like a lot of other things in life, especially bureaucracies, where you have the more powerful people at the top and the more active workers at the bottom. But and so anyway, let's forget about the first 6 zones of thought. And the 7th zone going in is what I'll call pavement. And it's just, you just, well, pavement as opposed to pavement. You know, pavement is something you can drive on, walk on. It's that bottom level uh, under your feet. And so the pavement, as I'm calling it, is just that bottom level of human thought where you're just bothered by a lot of things and you don't come up with solutions, not very often anyway, and you just want to spend a lot of time talking about how you feel, how this or that bothers you. You know, don't solve it, just listen type of thinking. That's the result of the pavement. And let me see what else I haven't already said that I have written down here. And well, it is a matter of expressed, even asserted stupidity, you know, where you actually work against intelligent ideas. You know, like don't solve it, just listen. There you have it. You're working against intelligent ideas. And those who think like this, who haven't risen to a higher thought level, they're sometimes insulted and called cunts. So if you ever been called the cunt, well, hey, you know that's because you haven't risen above using your pavement. Yeah, you haven't risen to the next level of thought or anything above it. So then there's what I'll call demandingness, and so it's that 8th sphere of thought in the mind, and thinks in terms of immediate short-term solutions, immediate gratification. It's still annoyed by long-term thinkers, long-term solutions, long drawn-out ideas, um, and people who think on that level are often referred to as a bitch because they do come up with what at least they think is an immediate solution, something that gives them immediate gratification, and they do come off in a very demanding way. I should also point out something that I don't have written down here, which is that first thing I mentioned, that pavement, that 7th sphere of thought, is very individualistic, whereas this demandingness, this 8th sphere of thought, does at least develop a small group mentality. I like to have at least a few people that they're close to, hang out with, and that sort of thing. Let me see. Then, of course, there's rationale, the thing I keep talking so much about. Now, I have a little more to say about that. Of course, it lays ideas out in order. It's responsible for mechanical inclination, long-term planning, and let me see. It's capable of being an effective authority, and it also corresponds with the first apocalyptic horse. I don't have my Bible open right now, and I'm not going to open it because it's already getting quite kind of long. But anyway, I believe it's Revelation chapter 6. I've committed so many scriptures to memory, not so much the reference, but the actual text itself, that I don't actually need to open the Bible in order to know that what I'm about to tell you is correct. But the other side of that is sometimes I'm a little uncertain as to what chapter it is, but I'm pretty sure it's Revelation chapter 6, the apocalyptic horses. I think the four men with the heads of beasts are in chapter 4. But anyway, so that first apocalyptic horse, it says that it was a white horse, and its rider was given a crown and went out conquering and to conquer. And we've talked about the whole man versus nature thing, I mean, as a society, not that I talked about it earlier, but as a society, we talked about man versus nature, and he uses his planning to conquer nature. And he uses his planning to conquer various problems, to overcome various obstacles through long-term planning. Okay, and so this first apocalyptic horse, it probably represents a few different things, but one of the things it represents is rational thought. And rational thought is that first level of thought that allows you to be an effective authority, going out conquering and to conquer. So, that's the ninth sphere of thought in the mind, I believe. Next to that, well, and I should say this, that beyond rationale, everything else that I'm about to mention doesn't really get talked about in our society. You hear a little bit about this next thing, not much. But there's what I'm calling conceptual thought, the 10th sphere of thought in the mind. So, juxtaposes rational processes. It's an extension of what came before it. As a matter of fact, as you work your way in, each successive part of the mind is an extension of what came before it, and just kind of upgrades what came before it. Okay, and so conceptual thought juxtaposes the rational processes so as to find the concepts that a concept that threads through them all. Say, okay, I saw these four processes over the course of time. This is the common thread in all four processes. This is what went well in all four processes. This is what went wrong in all four processes. This is the general rule that I have learned. This law of nature that I've learned from these four processes and how they all turned out. Here's a law of society, a law of how people think and behave. Some kind of general idea that I was able to ascertain by juxtaposing these processes and figuring out the concept that lies between them. Then again, you can do it the other way around, come up with the concept first, and then say, okay, I want everything that I do with respect to employment, with respect to religion, with respect to politics. I want everything that I do in this or that area of life to be guided by this concept, this general idea, this general rule, So there's that. Let me see. I did say that it gets little mentioned. That's my next note, by the way. So it compartmentalizes everything. So I said that that's a somewhat common phrase. Something you probably heard at least a couple times over the years, that men compartmentalize everything. And, well, I would say that when men are compartmentalizing everything, it is their conceptual thought at work, and the conceptual thought is the 10th sphere of thought. It is more powerful than that 9th sphere of thought, which is his rationale. And so he's moving up, basically. He's using a powerful part of his mind that most men actually don't use. Um, you know, it's hard enough just to get most men to use their rationale, and even when they do, uh, many who use it don't use it sufficiently. Uh, but it's very hard to get them to use their conceptual thought. And I would actually encourage women to also think conceptually. But let me see what else. So I mentioned a lot of stuff that I have down here already. So it is the man's conceptual thought, which women can also work on exhibiting. The conceptual thought is the first level of thought that's capable of navigating through society because you have to generalize the types of things that happen in society in order to effectively plan around them. And so a lot of times, a woman is just really scared to step out and wants the man to be with her. And it's not always because she feels like she might get robbed or raped, but a lot of times she just has a hard time relating to any large number of people. And I don't just mean all at once either. If you're meeting one new person every day for a year, then over the course of time, you'll come to see that they have certain thoughts, beliefs, ideas, customs that just don't set well with you or you don't understand. And men, because we naturally do exercise some degree of conceptual thought, or at least have the capability to do it, if we'll choose to use it, we do process these sorts of things and say, okay, well, I've met 365 new people this year, and a large percentage of them thought like this or acted like that, and therefore, going forward, I'm going to make a personal rule that helps me to deal with what I learned about these 365 people and the commonalities in their thoughts and behaviors. So there's that. Is that conceptual thought helps you to navigate through society and deal with any number of new people that you might meet. Um, but the man's conceptual thought is also most responsible for aggression, for war, because you conceptualize the types of things that should and shouldn't happen in the world, and that in that aggression, that war helps you to enforce those ideas. It's basically a rule-making part of the mind, but it's also represented by the second apocalyptic horse. And that second horse was a red horse, and its rider was given power to make war. And so I believe that there's a direct connection there. Let me flip the page, and I'm kind of breezing through these pages now. So early on, I mentioned Psalm 82:6, which says, "I have said ye are gods, ye are sons of the Most High." Now, I should say that verse 7 goes on to say, "Yet you would die like mere men and fall like a prince." And then in the New Testament, in John chapter 10, verse 34, Jesus is talking to the spiritual leaders of his day, or the spiritual misleaders as they may have been, and he says, "Know ye not that it is written, ye are gods? Know ye not that it is written, ye are gods?" And he went on and said a few other things along those same lines, and then these other guys wanted to stone him, and he actually had to run away from them. Later on, he stands still for the Romans and lets them take him and kill him. But in this instance, John chapter 10, beginning with verse 34, where Jesus says, "Know ye not that it is written, ye are gods." In that instance, Jesus actually runs away, like, it's not time for me to die, so I'm going to run and not let you kill me. But Jesus was referring to Psalm 82:6. He was reinforcing Psalm 82:6. And so, anyway, when I first became aware of those two scriptures back in 1994, maybe I'd read them sooner, but they really began to mean something to me when I read them in 1994, and I really took them to heart and said, okay, well, what does that mean then? And it was that thinking that caused me to begin to think about how the mind works, and I've not come out and said these things until now. But anyway, a person can be born with up to, these 10 zones of thought in their mind. I didn't describe the first 6, but the conceptual thought is the final part of the mind that you can actually be born with. And I would say that nobody but God himself has had this next part of the mind for as long as they've existed. Okay, so the rest of us,